Sorry guys I took a break, but we're back with season 6, starting straight back where we were. Kind of. So we start off randomly with Rick seeing a huge horde of walkers talking about how this truck's about to fall. And basically they need to get this zombie herd away from home and that they need to get into their spots and get everything ready. And of course as Rick's talking, the truck ends up falling, so now the timer begins now. Rick says get in their groups and run to their places now as everybody goes. Rick tells Sasha, Abraham, and Daryl to go get the horde in line, while Glenn's team has to go to the tractor station and take out any walkers to make sure they don't make the horde go another way. And Rick, Morgan, and Michonne are also going to help lead the horde. And now that everyone's getting ready, the horde's on its way. So let's get straight into it. But wait, better question, how did we end up getting here? So now this episode could be confusing. Now the black and white is what happened after Rick ended up shooting the man that killed Diana's husband, as she ends up telling Gabriel that he was wrong, that Rick and them aren't bad people. While that same night, remember, Glenn and Nicholas were getting into a huge fight, but Glenn ended up saving Nicholas and acting like they didn't get into a fight. And look who woke up. Tara's actually perfectly fine. Kinda. And after all these seasons, it looks like Morgan and Rick actually might be able to stay on a team together, because it looks like Morgan's more focused on life and it looks like Rick's more focused on survival. Glenn and his squad end up making it over to the tractor place to kill all the walkers, while Rick, Michonne, and Morgan are running for their spot. Rick and Daryl end up talking about the W people because they were talking about how they were walkers and how Daryl actually seen some of them. So Rick says for now on they don't need new people coming here, but Daryl doesn't agree with Rick as there's still people out there that need to be saved. While Sasha and Abraham drive the car to meet Daryl and get the horde. And of course, there was a lot of new characters that I didn't really even understand until Abraham showed me it in black and white. Apparently, Diana sent out a team to look for supplies a long time ago and they just now got back. Which at first Eugene doesn't believe, but of course I believed it because these people would have straight killed Eugene. So Eugene welcomes them home. While Rick and Morgan end up getting some talking time, actually getting used to each other for the first time. But Rick ends up seeing Gabriel and this other dude digging 2 holes, but Rick says they only need 1. He tells them that Jesse's husband, the dude that killed Reggie, is not going to be buried in Alexandria. And Diana agrees and tells him to take him to this bridge, as the kid ends up listening. Ooh. So Morgan and Rick end up making it to the place where they're about to bury him. Rick ends up hearing a super loud noise, and that's where he finds the huge horde of walkers we seen earlier. And the reason why they're worried is because it leads straight back to home. But of course Jesse's kid ended up falling, getting chased by walkers, and literally almost falls into a cliff of walkers, but Rick saves him just in time. While Daryl rides alone on his bike with the biggest horde of walkers we've probably seen so far. While back then, Rick and Morgan were definitely worried about this getting back home, so they have to tell everyone back there. So Glenn and his group end up finally making it over to the tractor place, which he took Nicholas to. I don't know why. While this stupid dude right here wants to talk about how they're not ready, but Rick tells them that they have to start barricading this place because if they don't hurry up and find a way to get these walkers gone, that their home will be gone. Because as soon as that truck ends up falling, all of those walkers are coming straight towards their home. So while Diana's still the leader, she tells everyone to listen to Rick, so Rick tells everybody their positions. And Rick, Morgan, and Michonne finally get there on time, and the reason they were there is to shoot off flares so the walkers turn that way and get hit off of the cars so they stay in place. And to be honest, I honestly thought that these walls wouldn't hold, but they actually did. Getting all of the walkers to perfectly go the way they need. Let's go. But Glenn's group was supposed to take out all these walkers, so now that's their plan. They gotta do it quick before the walkers end up passing them. And Eugene was trying to get some medicine for Tara probably, ends up hearing that one bald dude that didn't agree with Rick earlier. Eugene hears them talking to all the others and basically saying that they need to kill Rick so they can just stop this. But Eugene ends up making a loud noise and the dude ends up hearing Eugene. And since Eugene heard him, he was going to kill him until Rick and the others end up walking in. Whew, wrong time, buddy. Rick says he probably should have put up some guards, but you know he's just going to take the gun like this. put the dude down on the ground and showed him who's actually boss. And to be honest with you, I honestly thought Rick was gonna kill him, but he ends up giving the gun over to Daryl, as it looks like little bro shit his pants. So now Rick and Glenn's team ended up colliding after they took out those walkers, and that's where this dude ends up saying that Rick was right. But as they're all moving, he ends up getting bit by a walker on a tree. And I mean, he ends up getting bit on his face, so he starts to scream, which is starting to attract the horde of walkers. But Rick ends up taking them out as the walkers get back in line. And then back in the black and white, it just shows Rick telling everybody where they need to go. And now we're finally here, and it seems like they got the horde going the place that they need to. Until all of a sudden, a huge truck horn ends up going off, making all of the walkers come towards them. And it seems like the horde's going towards the alarm. But the bad part is the alarm's coming from home. What's going on over there? And we're back with episode 2, seeing Enid. Because remember, nobody's been outside of the walls besides her. And what basically happened was her family was trying to find a way out, but a bunch of walkers ended up coming and killing both of her parents. She ended up being stuck alone with no shelter or food, even eating a turtle straight raw. Like, that's not KFC. But I mean, I'm not here to judge, you do you. But anyway, she ends up eventually finding the walls. And of course, as soon as she walked in, they weren't going to say no to a girl. And now we're at Alexandria, kinda near when the horde stuff's going on. Carol's explaining to everyone what she's going to make a mean dinner. And it's honestly nice seeing everybody get along and not have to survive for once. And Jesse's even trying to get some sun time, but he doesn't seem to really want to talk to her. Mostly because she just wants to give him a haircut to talk to him, but he doesn't like that her and Rick are friends. While Diana and Maggie are finding out the place, Maggie ends up finding some seeds, so she's kind of just like Herschel. So it looks like it's finally time to start growing some fruits and vegetables. And it seems like Tara's still having really bad headaches, so her and Eugene end up going to get some medicine, but it looks like Denise is the new doctor now. Since, you know, Rick kind of killed the surgeon. Gabriel even tries to come up to Carl and ask him to help him with weapons. Even though Carl kind of hates Gabriel, he ends up saying that he'll help him to come by his house at this certain time. And while everyone's chilling, Carol's trying to make a casserole, setting her little timer, and looks over at her friend smoking a cigarette, which she's really not impressed because she tried to tell her to quit, which is super crazy. But not crazier than the dude that comes out of nowhere and kills her. And yeah, no, this ain't a dream. People are actually getting burned alive and people are jumping the fences right now. Carol says that none of them are super armed and that they need to get to the guns. Carl ends up finding Enid as she's trying to leave, but he tells her that she needs to stay with them and protect Judith. While Carol ends up fighting some of these dudes, which are actually the W people that Morgan ran into earlier. And Spencer, I don't know where he's been, but apparently now he's sniping at people. But his sniper aim is worse than my first game of Warzone. But as he goes over to peek another wall, he ends up seeing a truck come straight for their walls. And of course he ends up seeing it bash through the walls because he can't stop it. And that's how the horn was going off. That's attracting the walkers right now. Spencer goes to look if the person's there, but he's actually dead, and Morgan helps him because Morgan came back after Rick and them shot off the flares. And this dude tries to fight Morgan, but Morgan doesn't want to kill him, but Carol doesn't really care, so she does it for him. And tells Morgan that she has a plan. So she puts a W on her head and dresses up like them and puts Morgan in the chains and acts like he's one of the victims. And it seems like Denise and Tara are pretty stressed because now they got real people that are about to die that are coming in that need help. And Jessie ends up leaving one of her youngest sons and locks the door because she's looking for her other son and actually heard somebody come in through the house. She finds the lady and sees that she's hurt, so she runs for her and knifes her straight in the neck and just keeps murdering her. Like, I'm not even playing. This is probably the most murderous I've seen somebody kill someone in this show. So Morgan and Carol's idea works, but Morgan ends up seeing that Gabriel needs help. So in Carol's disguise, she still walks through and bops all of them. While of course Gabriel can't save his life, this dude's about to kill him, but Morgan ends up knocking him out, saving his life just in time. And Carol finally makes it to the guns, but this woman had the same idea, but Carol ends up killing her just in time, so now they got the guns. So everyone loads up and gets their pistols and ARs as they try to take out all the others. And they all try to swarm Morgan, and that's when the dude realizes that Morgan was that dude they seen earlier. And as Morgan just whoops all of them at the same time, he tells them that they need to stop and that they need to run because his people have guns and they'll kill them all. So they end up listening to Morgan as they all run away, walking around all the damage that's been done and all the people that have been killed. Like, that literally just happened in the span of probably 30 minutes. And I honestly feel bad for Carol because I feel like she has to kill, but she just doesn't want to. Aaron also ends up finding one of the bags of the wolf people and figures out that the reason they knew where Alexandria was because of Aaron's pictures that he ended up showing Rick earlier. So it's honestly kind of his fault they found Alexandria. And even though Denise could help Tara with her pills for her headache, she can't help somebody bleeding, and this woman ends up dying. And as soon as Carl goes to look for Enid after everything calms down, she ends up leaving him a note saying just survive somehow. And now that everything's over, Morgan ends up looking through some rooms just to see what's going on. You know, because the door was open and it's just kind of weird. But he was right, because one of the other wolf people that he's seen at the beginning ends up trying to attack him. But he ends up getting the better hand of him. And basically all he says is I'm sorry and knocks him out or kills him. And as Morgan and Carol are both walking around, we see all the damage and carnage that's happened. And now we probably see why Morgan doesn't want to kill people anymore. But hopefully we'll figure out Morgan's episode soon. And we're back with Glenn and Rick running back with their group trying to figure out what's going on at home, which they get in contact close enough for the walkies to work, but nobody's answering. And the biggest thing to know about this episode is that Rick, Michonne, and Glenn are capable of surviving, but the rest of them aren't. So it's honestly weird seeing a team of people that don't know how to survive be with a team of people that can survive. So the plan is that Rick needs to go look for the rest of the herd, as they need to all get back home and figure out what's going on. But Rick also pulls over Glenn and Michonne and basically tells them that they're not all going to survive and that they're just going to have to get home no matter what. Because something big is happening at home and they're on a timer, and if they waste too much time, everyone's going to die. Speaking of dying, as soon as they end up stop talking, we see that somebody's already getting killed straight off the rip. And it's sad to say it, but it seems like Rick was right. None of these people are capable of surviving, so if Glenn and Michonne can't keep them alive, then they're all dead. So it's time to get back home. But remember, it definitely wasn't a short ride to get there, so they're going to have to go to the forest and the town to get back home. Which of course they end up getting hoarded by walkers, which they take out, but one person ends up getting bit. This black dude ends up falling on his leg, spraining it, while this dude literally just runs away from the gang, never to be seen. But I think Daryl's trying to go home because I think he hears the horde, but Sasha and Abraham say that they need to keep going 13 more miles out so they can get them far away from home as possible. So now we have a sprained girl with one leg hurt, a black dude with one leg hurt, and a white dude that's bit. And another part of the story is that the only way they're going to find their way back home is from Nicholas. And if they don't end up hurrying, they're going to end up food just like this dude right here, which is the dude that actually ran away from their team earlier because of the hat. But even though Rick said they had to keep pushing no matter what, Glenn and Michonne ended up taking a break since everyone's hurting. And Glenn says to Michonne that him and Nicholas are going to look for the way out while they sit here and wait. And Rick's finding a couple walkers as he sees, but he's still not finding the rest of the whole horde. But it looks like Michonne's found some of the horde, and they're coming now. So there's no more time to breathe, it's time to go. They bust down the door, kill all the walkers, and end up running for their lives. Which they can't go too fast because two of them have sprained legs, but they're running as fast as possible. But I guess this woman's legs couldn't put out any longer, and she tells them to just go as she sacrifices her life so they can get away. The only thing stopping them from getting home and away from these walkers in this gate, so now once they jump it, they're out. But they need to hurry because these walkers are looking hungry. Now Glenn and Nicholas are also getting chased by this horde. Now they don't have anywhere to go. It looks like they're at a dead end. I could probably jump that fence. I know it probably hurt. But it's not looking good, so it looks like Glenn and Nicholas are going to have to take them all out. And as soon as Michonne jumps over the fence, the white dude tries to jump it too, but he's too late. And now there's only 3 of them. Glenn and Nicholas end up getting surrounded on a trash can with no bullets, trying to kill him with knives. So Nicholas starts to freak out, and he looks over at Glenn and he shoots himself in the head, and his body falls on Glenn, pushing him down to the walkers. And it seems like after all this time Glenn's helped and survived all of these diseases, it looks like he's actually dead this time. But of course we won't know because Robert Kirkman. Now we're back with Michonne and the other dudes trying to get back home. And it looks like Rick found the RV while he's talking on the walkie-talkie, trying to figure out where the herd is. And Daryl ends up hearing them, but those wolf people from earlier that Morgan let leave end up trying to kill Rick with the guns now. Rick ends up tackling down the dude and ends up getting ambushed by another one, but kills them both. But now that Daryl ends up hearing those truck sirens and Rick's walkie-talkies gunshots, he's going back towards them. But Rick makes sure to kill every single last one of them, so no more wolf people, and he tells Daryl. And now that Daryl knows he's alright, he joins back with Sasha and the team because they have to get this horde away from home. And Rick's literally sitting here thinking, like, where could this horde literally be? Until as soon as he takes a breather, they end up popping out of the bushes. And Rick better get going because it's not looking too good for him right now. And we're back with episode 4, starting out now with Morgan talking to someone, saying that he's about to tell him his whole story and how he's changed. Because he's came so far, and he's gonna let you know every single last bit now. Now we cut to them, which is basically around when Michonne and Rick and Carl left Morgan. And it seems like it's a good thing that they didn't take him to the prison because he was going crazy. All he wanted to do was make sure everything was gone and clear anything and everything possible. Eventually he ends up leaving the place that he stayed at, takes his gun, and ends up going to look for things to clear. And I mean, he just brutally tries to take out these walkers. Like, he wants to do this. He wants to keep killing and killing and killing. It doesn't matter what's in his path. If you are a person running and Morgan ends up seeing you, he'll end up turning you into a stick kebab just like he did this dude. And then the other one kind of gets it easy as he just strangles him to death. Like, yeah, imagine Morgan doing this stuff at the prison. Would have been bad. But after clearing all that area, he ends up seeing a nice place. The sun hits perfectly. And that's where he ends up crossing some cans, which has to mean somebody left him there in the zombie apocalypse. And he actually ends up finding himself a goat, but he ends up hearing a man say please don't take his goat because he's trying to learn how to make cheese. As he's talking, messing around, Morgan actually ends up seeing him for a second and tries to take some shots off, but doesn't hit him. And I love how it shows this camera feature as it looks like Morgan's going super insane and ready to kill anyone or anything in his path. Like, even though the dude's trying to talk to him, Morgan's still trying to kill him. But the dude ends up getting the better hand of him, hitting him with a stick, and ends up knocking him straight out, and we get the first meet of Eastman. Which he seems like a pretty nice guy, leaving him 4 tomatoes, 2 little sausages, and an orange juice. Like, my goodness. But Morgan's not eating all he's saying is for him to kill him because Morgan really just doesn't care. He either wants to kill everyone or get killed himself. But Eastman has him in this cage and says he's not going to let him out and he's going to go on a run, and he wants him to protect Tabitha the goat. He also wants him to read this book called The Art of Peace, and he needs him to get used to it. And what he means by watch Tabitha the goat is he can look straight out this window and see her right here as Eastman actually takes her out, and we see where he's got his stick skills from, but how do you learn them? And as Eastman goes to do some chores, Morgan ends up enjoying his lunch. And he actually ends up even sleeping there and ends up waking up for more breakfast as Eastman is just trying to make cheese. Because getting goat milk is way easier than getting goat cheese. Which I'm not gonna lie, this character was the most underrated one in the apocalypse. So as the day's going up, Morgan ends up seeing Eastman practicing with the stick. And that's where Eastman comes in and tells Morgan that he's been where he's been at before and he doesn't want him to go crazy like that, and he needs to learn the style of peace and not to kill people. And he also tells Morgan apparently that this cage has never been locked. And at this point I swear Eastman could have been lying, but he actually backs up and says he can leave or he can stay on the couch, but he will not kill Eastman. So he ends up opening up the door. And of course we know that Morgan can't control himself because he's still going insane right now. But Eastman ends up getting the better hand, and Morgan tells him to kill him, but Eastman just lets go because he's not going to. And literally, even though Morgan actually almost tried to kill Eastman, he still is going to feed him. But Morgan ends up seeing the Art of Peace book, and even though he knows that he's not stuck in the cage, he stays in the cage and starts to read it. Which the Art of Peace is Aikido, meaning not to kill. But Morgan ends up seeing that Tabitha the goat got out of her cage, so he ends up taking out the zombies, making sure that it's safe. And now he's starting to help Eastman with his chores, so it looks like Morgan and him are starting to get along. And Eastman ended up seeing that Morgan's stick broke, so this is where Morgan finally gets the stick that we seen earlier. Eastman found it for him specifically and made sure that it won't break easily. And I'm gonna tell you now, Morgan has this stick for a long time. And they finally get out in the nature, and that's where Eastman finally teaches Morgan the way. And it seems like Morgan's just chilling on the chair now, as Eastman still can't get that cheese right. But now we finally get to the deep part about this episode. If y'all weren't wondering this whole time, Eastman has a prison cell in his house. Why? Which Morgan actually asked for me, so let's get to that now. So Eastman ends up saying that he got this house before him and his wife and his daughter ended up moving in here, and the jail cell wasn't there before. What Eastman's job was before was to interview people that have killed people, murders, and done horrible things to people. And that's where one day he ends up interviewing a dude named Cryat Dallas Wilson. So Eastman tries to get an interview out of Cryat Wilson, which he ends up hearing and sees that Eastman actually knows how evil he really is. And that's where he ends up smiling and hits Eastman across the face. And that's where Eastman could see in his eyes that he was truly evil. But he made sure to keep giving people information that he needed to stay in jail forever, and Eastman tried to keep him in jail as long as he could, but he ended up getting out. And that's where Eastman says that Cryat didn't just get out of jail because he wanted to. He went straight to Eastman's house, killed his wife, his son, and daughter, which was before the apocalypse. And that's where as soon as he ends up killing all of them, he goes straight to the next police station and surrenders and goes straight back to jail, just so he could ruin Eastman's life. And this is honestly one of the saddest stories of The Walking Dead and one of the most underrated characters ever. Like, I don't even know how Morgan's just taking this in. And the reason why he put that cell there was to bring Cryat there, because he ended up figuring out what days he was working for parole, of course, because he was still in jail. And he ends up kidnapping him, taking him to this jail, and leaves him here. And he starved for 47 days before he died. Wow, y'all got to play that back to remember that story. But it looks like we start off the next day, and it looks like it's time to get to training. And Eastman's talking about them possibly leaving there to go somewhere towards the ocean. But you know he can't have that since Fear the Walking Dead's there, plot purpose. So Morgan and Eastman end up getting in their stands ready to practice. But they end up seeing a walker, so Morgan goes to take it down, but he ends up figuring out it's the kid that he strangled earlier, so he freezes. And that's where Eastman jumps in front of him and takes the bot for him. No! One of the best characters ever ends up getting bit. But Morgan's super mad that he ended up taking that bot for him. So Morgan ends up trying to fight Eastman, trying to get the better of him with his own moves, but he still can't win. Morgan says to kill him, but Eastman says no, and it's time for them to get back home, but Morgan says he ain't going with him. So Morgan goes back to making his little shiv knives. And Morgan ends up actually finding people and doesn't kill them. They end up opening up their bag and actually leaving him some food. And he just lets them leave as the girl says thank you. And that's where we're starting to see how Morgan's changed now. But as soon as he goes back to Eastman's, it looks like Eastman wasn't the only one that got bit, not Tabitha. It seems like Eastman's devastated because he still didn't make that cheese. But Morgan tells Eastman that he needs to sit down, that he ain't looking too well. And it looks like he's right as he's starting to get a little bit more sweatier, and he ends up telling Morgan that he can stay here. But Eastman also tells him that he would rather him leave and try to find people, because the only way to live is with people. So Morgan helps him to his room, and that's where we cut to Morgan practicing in the morning by himself. And it looks like Eastman ended up doing the deed because Morgan ends up leaving the building. And as we passed all the signs of all the people buried there, Eastman's name was there. But lucky for Morgan, he was right beside the railroad and ended up seeing the big map for Terminus. So he actually ended up going for Terminus and probably seeing the sign that Rick left him. And that's where Morgan says that that's his story, which he was telling to this wolf dude that probably could care less, not gonna lie. But the wolf dude ends up telling Morgan that he thinks that he's gonna be able to change him, and Morgan says yes, but the wolf dude says as soon as he gets out of these ropes that he will kill him. But Morgan says that that's not gonna happen. And it looks like he's just gonna leave him in this door and not tell anyone about it. But it looks like Morgan's just gonna keep this a secret for himself. And we're back with episode 5, starting out with Diana back at Alexandria. And she ends up getting on the top of the walls and ends up looking at how nice the place looks, even though they're still cleaning up the ones that are dead. She looks over to hear a huge sound, and that's where we see that Rick's been running from this horde by himself all the way back home, because the half the horde split up. So Michonne and the others, already being home, end up opening the door for Rick. And now it seems like their walls are surrounded and none of the people are used to this. Rick says that he's sorry, but half of the horde end up splitting up and now they're here, but they're just gonna have to end up being quiet. And everybody really ain't with Rick, but Aaron ends up standing up for him and saying that Rick got half of the horde away, because if half of the horde wasn't away, then they'd all be dead by now. And he also tells everyone it's his fault that they ended up finding Alexandria. But now that everybody's worried about all the walkers outside, they don't care. They just want to feed their families because they don't want them to starve and die. So everyone stops listening to Diana and they all just take out the rations that they want. Which Spencer ends up shutting down because he actually seems like a good guy. So maybe he's got potential, because everyone does end up listening. Erin ends up walking into Maggie and seems like she's arming up. Erin asks where she's going. She says she's looking for Glenn, because she wants to know if Nicholas tried to kill him again or if that he's actually in trouble. So since Aaron knows, the ways around town, he ends up telling her that he knows a little way that they can go to get in town quick. So basically Aaron's going too, while Diana's taking her lovely time figuring out all the crops positions and even education trainers for schools for kids. But let me take back what I said about Spencer. He ended up taking half the rations that he wanted just so everybody else left it. Number 1 douchebag. And Carl ends up going over to Ron, which is Jesse's son, and asks him where Enid is, and apparently Enid's still outside of the walls after all those walkers are out there, and Carl wants to go look for her, but Ron says he doesn't need to go. But Carl says he's gonna go anyways and pushes Ron, but Ron says if he ends up going that he'll tell his dad. And basically if his dad don't die, someone will die trying to get to him. And it looks like Tara and Denise are trying to start a little conversation together, while Jessie finally stands up and kills her first walker, which everyone was watching, and she explains that they need to learn how to kill walkers or they won't know how to survive. And now it's time for Aaron and Maggie to get down in the sewers, because that's the way to the town. And it's kind of spooky because last time we were in the sewers was literally season 1. They end up going the right way, but as soon as Aaron ends up breaking this door open, he ends up bashing his head. And Maggie really wants Aaron to go back, but Aaron says he's not leaving Maggie, so they push on together. Ron goes to tell Rick, tells him that Carl is trying to leave, but Rick says that he won't. And Ron says he wants to learn how to use a gun. So it's time for Rick to actually teach him how to do it. But I'm going to tell you right now, Rick did not need to teach his kid how to shoot. But sadly for Aaron and Maggie, the only way out is actually barred in with steel, and they can't get out from the other side. And it's full of walkers, so either way, it's not going to help. And we end up getting a sad speech from Maggie because she's sad that Glenn burned the only picture that he had back at her at the prison, and that they're supposed to be staying together forever and not supposed to leave each other's side. And it's really crazy how Glenn and her went from just being together to actually loving each other as much as they do. But apparently Diana's on night watch mode, ends up seeing a walker and straight starts to attack it, but you know she doesn't hit it in the brain, just keeps stabbing it in the stomach. So Rick helps her out a little bit since she didn't know where to hit it at. And as all the names were wrote on the wall that were dead, Maggie and Aaron end up cleaning off Nicholas and Glenn's name because they got hope that they're still alive. And Jesse's like, Rick, I can't be around you, but I really do like you. But Rick makes sure to give fans exactly what we wanted him to do. He finally gets with the girl that he's been wanting this whole time. While Diana still doesn't seem stable from all these walkers. Honestly, none of them do, and if Rick don't keep this whole team going, I don't know what will. And we're back with episode 6, starting with Daryl, Sasha, and Abraham leading the horde away from home. Which finally they went enough miles out to let the horde go. So they end up speeding away from the herd and they end up taking a left on the way towards home. But as soon as they go, they end up getting shot up by 2 different cars. And a couple people laid out of their cars. Daryl ends up sliding off of his bike while Sasha and Abraham end up running away from another car. But Daryl isn't here to make friends. He gets straight back on his bike, starts it up, gasses it, and gets away as people try to shoot at him. Like, whoever this is, they got teams and they're strapped up. But Abraham and Sasha end up losing control and end up going straight through a brick wall, and they end up thinking that they're dead. But Daryl isn't too lucky as he's still getting followed and he has to run through these walkers on a bike. Abraham and Sasha end up finding that same car and end up shooting and killing everybody that's in it, making sure that they're dead. But it looks like Daryl's still getting chased. But he ends up pulling a Scooby-Doo move as the car ends up going through the road. He ends up not knowing that a bike can go off-road. So now it's time for Daryl to find Abraham and Sasha. But first, let's take a breather. I mean, you know, he just kind of skidded off a bike and almost died to a bunch of people shooting him. He's in a burnt forest area, but we'll be right back with him. He starts taking his bike straight through this forest, and it looks like something definitely had to go off like a fire. Because literally everything is burnt to death. So Daryl starts to try to get close to where he was and tries to get Abraham and Sasha, but has no answer. And you know, falling off a bike on concrete definitely is going to leave you a 3rd-degree burn. So basically we have a wounded Daryl going through a forest, but he ends up hearing a sound, so he ends up stashing his bike. And of course, Daryl's a tracker, so he definitely knows that there's people here, and there ends up being 3 people. The dude's name is Dwight, and the brown-haired lady's Sherry, and that's her sister. But of course, you don't see Dwight until now. He ends up waking up Daryl, and that's when they end up talking about how Dwight and all of them ended up coming from a group that they don't agree with, because if they don't abide by the rules, they will die, and they end up taking all the meds from the place. Not too smart. But what's also not too smart is keeping Daryl caged up, you know? It's not how he really likes it, but Dwight doesn't care. And I think with a gun pointed at Daryl's head, he's just gonna listen to him. Apparently Sherry's sister knows about some kids that they ended up taking care of back in the day, so they want to see if they're okay or not. But I'm gonna be honest with you, if the forest looks like this, I don't think they're okay. But apparently they do make sure that Daryl does drink some type of water and stay hydrated. And the place that Sherry's sister ended up knowing where everyone else was is full of walkers, and that's what you should expect in Apocalypse. But they're all devastated, and Sherry's sister knows one more place where those kids were. But apparently the sister's hurt, but as soon as she ends up falling down, Daryl takes off with the bag as Dwight tries to shoot at him, but he ends up getting away. But of course running away was kind of loud, so he ends up seeing one of these nasty grass walkers, and he has to find his crossbow quick. But you know Daryl ain't missing that headshot, come on, let's be honest. And that's where he sees a whole thing full of insulin, like, gosh, they took all the meds. Oh yeah, and Sasha and Abraham have been doing things. Like as soon as they ended up stopping, they tried to look for Daryl and contacting him, but he was out of range too. But they know that Daryl knows where they're at, so they're just gonna stay here for a night and wait to see if he's gonna come. They check every room, make sure everything's empty, which seems to be alright. And we get some good conversations with Abraham and Sasha, with them like kind of agreeing but disagreeing and also flirting, I don't know. It just definitely looks like it's gonna grow into something. But Daryl's about payback. He didn't even leave. He could have left, but Daryl comes straight back and tells Dwight to give him that gun right now. He says he wants everything Dwight has, but Dwight says he only has a statue that he carved earlier. So Daryl says to pull it out and give it to him right now. and drops them all the meds they need and ends up leaving. Well, attempts to leave because the people that Dwight stole that medicine from end up appearing. They tell him that they're in big trouble because they made him waste gas to get up here and waste all this time to get them. And they stole the meds, so if they don't leave now, they're gonna be in big trouble. But that truck's about to push into the woods, so Daryl takes the initiative to help Dwight and the others. Like, I love how much Daryl's changed. He gets them in a good hiding spot, and they set a little good walker trap. And what basically happens is Daryl ends up hitting this bush, and this dude ends up hearing it. And as soon as he doesn't notice what's on the rock, he ends up getting bit on the arm. Which the plan works perfectly because they have to cut the dude's arm off, taking him back to the place. And Sherry finally gets her sister patched up. But Dwight even asks why he would save him after he just left him earlier. And Daryl says it's just the right thing to do. And it seems like Abraham and Sasha slept perfectly fine. But when Abraham goes on the rooftop of this building, he finds a zombie just dangling. Looks over on this truck, finds a Resident Evil box, and ends up opening it up to 3 RPGs. And he even got some of the expensive guards. And to make it even better, this zombie has the RPG rocket launcher. So this is what Abraham's gonna spend his time on. Which he keeps trying, but it's kinda hard to get a rocket launcher from a zombie and not fall off. But lucky for Abraham, he ends up sliding off with the launcher staying right there. And Abraham's definitely happy with his haul. And apparently Abraham wants to get used to Sasha. Which Sasha's like, you got some things you gotta deal with, Rosita. But Abraham knows that, which this episode kinda was about Abraham needing to know about his self-worth. But as soon as Sherry's sister ends up finding the place that they were last at, of course it's burnt. Do you see the trees around? Anyways, they got suffocated in the worst way possible, and Sherry's sister ends up going to pay some respect, and the zombies end up getting up out of the stuff and end up biting her right on her neck. So now she's dead, but Daryl ends up helping him dig a grave. Daryl ends up leading them back to his bike and says that he can join the team of his other 2, but as soon as he ends up getting on his bike, Dwight literally turns on him after helping him. So they end up taking his bike, throwing him some meds for his bike injury, and they end up saying that they're sorry, which Daryl says that they're definitely gonna be. And they go back to the team that they ended up stealing the supplies from. But Daryl doesn't seem too unlucky because he ends up finding the truck. Alright, days getting better and better. And Abraham even switches up his wardrobe a little bit. And they end up hearing the truck pull up. But like I said earlier, Daryl was in a truck. So our teams finally reunited. And as they're on the way home, Daryl tells them that they're coming in. And they hear a bunch of static and Daryl asks come again. Because it seems like something bad's happening at home again. And we're back with episode 7, which I'm not doing the season finale because this took way longer than expected. But we're back with Glenn and Nicholas. And what we seen earlier was actually Nicholas's body. Of course not Glenn's. But it seems like Glenn still doesn't have a choice of going anywhere because all the walkers are in his way. Eventually he kills all the ones near him and then the other ones end up leaving. And it's the next day. But being out a day without water kinda sucks. So he ends up going to a nearby building and looking around for water. He ends up finding a stash of old cans and a nice water bottle. But as soon as he starts to put everything together, we see Enid as she runs away because remember she's not back at Alexandria, she left. And it looks like these two are going to play a game of hide and seek. While Rick and Maggie talk, and Maggie says that she's just waiting for a sign from Glenn that she knows what's going to happen soon. Rick ends up giving Jesse's son a gun, but even though he's teaching him how to aim and everything and that he gets to keep it, there's no bullets in it. And since Morgan's about peace, he ends up talking to Rick saying he could have killed him back then when, he kind of stabbed him with a knife at first. But he didn't, and Rick says because he was his friend, but he says all life is precious and that's how we need to see things. Which I honestly don't agree with Morgan with, but Morgan did come from a far past, which I do really like his character. And Rosita's teaching all the people how to use weapons, because you never know when them walkers might come in. Genie ends up wimping out, but Rosita sets him straight, making sure he knows about all the dead people that he killed, getting him to Washington just to see that he's not a, scientist. But Glenn still thinks that the herd's out going towards home, and Enid kind of addresses him up, telling him that it's already at home. So Glenn says that they need to go now and that he needs her help. But it looks like she doesn't want to go back. But of course she's not going to shoot him. Glenn's got plot armor. And Enid ends up finding some balloons and says that this will be a way to show that they're there. So you know what? Let's just keep them. But of course Ron ends up sneaking into the guns room as everybody's dealing with the food. And while no one's watching, he takes a handful of ammo. And while Rick and this dude are having a conversation, they end up seeing Spencer trying to Tomb Raider his way across the building where the zombies are. He keeps trying to go because he's trying to get in a car and actually lead them away, which is kind of stupid still. But just like any Tomb Raider game, he ends up slipping and breaking his rope right into some walkers, but luckily lives. Thanks to Tara and Rick. And Rick makes sure to tell him that he's pretty stupid, if he tries some stuff like that again, that he's not going to save him. And even though this ain't a big thing, one of Jesse's sons is too scared to come downstairs ever since the walkers have been there. But Rick ends up telling Diana that he could have let Spencer die and found a way to get into a car and actually lead them away, but instead he saved Spencer. But Diana is proud that Rick picked that choice, and everything seems to be going well. And as everything's getting better, Maggie ends up seeing the balloons from Glenn. And as soon as Maggie's about to run to the team and tell everybody what's going on, the tower starts to collapse, breaking down the wall, and the zombies are coming in. I'll see y'all next video.